Welcome to Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers. My name is Chris Hackala, and I'm your podcast host. In this series of conversations, we speak with folks who have made the leap from a traditional faculty member position to a role in a center for teaching and learning. The conversations focus on how individuals moved from faculty to a center and how that move impacted their work, their career trajectory, and their personal and professional identity. Along the way, we talk about tips, advice, and challenges that come from working in a center. Sit back and enjoy these chats on Psych Sessions on Teaching and Learning Centers. Hi, so today I'm here with Linda Bruenjes, who is the Director for the Center for Teaching and Faculty Excellence, I got that wrong, at Suffolk University in Boston. Linda, can you say your title again?
Thanks, Chris. It's nice to be here. My name is Linda Bruenjes, and I'm the Director for the Center for Teaching and Scholarly Excellence. So,
Linda, I was saying to you before we started, I asked you the name of your center because I wanted to make sure I got it right, and I'm glad you were able to sort of help me correct it, because one of the things that's really interesting is that centers have such different focuses depending on the size of the institution and the culture of what is expected. And some have scholarly pieces to it and some don't. And so I'll be interested as we talk to hear how the scholarly piece sort of fits into your center, because I think that kind of work at an institution like Suffolk can be incredibly beneficial. So as we talk, I'll try to pull that out a little bit, because I do think it's really interesting. Because just for example, and this is why I had trouble with your title, our title is the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship. So a long title with lots of things in it. But anyway, thanks for being here, Linda. And what I'd like you to start with is if you could just give me a little bit of an overview of how you came to be the director at Suffolk, a little bit of your background, like your academic discipline, where you went to school, so we have a flavor of who you are.
Well, it's been a long road, I guess. So thanks again for Chris for having me. I started doing some work in a public housing project here in Boston, and we were helping women on age-dependent children get some skills in being office administrators. One of the best jobs I've ever had. And what I learned from that is I really learned to listen and to ask questions, because the students that I were working with were adults, and they range from 18 to 60 years old. And how does one listen to one in their mid-20s? So I really needed to get to know them, and it was the best education in my life. It also taught me to be an advocate for student learning. And so it's just really one way that I began my teaching in higher ed. I started at a 2-year school in Boston, junior college. And then I was at LaSalle College for 16 years. And there I was a faculty member. I was the director of academic technology. I was the chair of the computer information science department. I was the founding director of online learning. We used to certify faculty to teach online. A really wonderful way of working with faculty and helping them sort of not understand just how to teach online, but what they can bring to the face-to-face classroom. We learned so much, as did they. Go ahead.
I just want to, this is really interesting what you just said. That notion of learning online and what faculty can bring to the table with online and translate those skills into face-to-face is, I think, really timely now, given the move that many faculty made to emergency remote teaching last year, and how some of the things that they brought to the table there could be brought back to the classroom. And I think that's something that we can constantly remind faculty of, is that when we made that switch, it wasn't a switch away from teaching and learning. It was a switch away from the modality of teaching and learning. That's really important. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that. And I really like talking to people who work in that field, because I think that too often we see them as two different things.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because one of the things that we've learned early on is that academic technology is a way to engage students. But that is not really the pedagogy, right? That's just the tool and the remote learning. And so, and as you think about the remote learning that we've just been through, it's not online teaching per se, it's remote learning, right? So it was a very different kind of animal. When we were working with faculty at my earlier institution, and we found that they were learning in terms of teaching online and they were bringing to the face-to-face classroom, we thought we hit upon something. We thought, wow, this is something we're really going to explore and do some research on. And as we started doing our own research into the literature, we found, yes, this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for a long time. It just was never brought to the surface as far as we knew. So that was one thing that just sort of moved me on to the next place, which was really, I went to Mass College of Pharmacy, MCPHS. I was the assistant dean for, it was more of a faculty development position, but it was specifically academic technology. We did a lot of work with iPads, as you know, in a university that's known for pharmacy education. They teach in very large classrooms. And so we had some really innovative faculty who used tools to not only reach the students that were in the classroom with them, but also to put things online for them so that they could continually learn. And then that brought me to Suffolk University. I started here as an associate director and then was lucky enough to move into the director's position. I've been here for 8 years and I love it. And it's a great institution to work for and the faculty here are fantastic.
Well, that's great. And I'm really happy to hear this sort of pathway because it sounds like a lot of similar pathways have been followed by other faculty developers who have honed their skills in a variety of ways at different institutions before landing where they land. And I think that that's really part of the process. And I think what it does is it helps us sort of sharpen our skills and be more attuned to the nuances of different institutions. And only because I know these institutions, Suffolk is very different than Mass College of Pharmacy, which is very different than LaSalle.
Right.
And in fact, LaSalle and Suffolk are probably more similar than Mass College of Pharmacy, which is kind of a different place. And I think that they all have their strengths and they all have their niches. And I think that you take away from each of those institutions a set of skills that can benefit the people that you work with currently. So I think that that's really great. And I actually think faculty developers who do move from one job to another really do help the faculty by having a different perspective on things as well. So I think that's really interesting. So in your role at Suffolk, you support teaching and learning and scholarship. And typically the way that that's done at institutions is there's programming and there's all sorts of ideas and things that people try. So I'd be curious to know if you could tell us a little bit about one or two programs or projects that you've worked on at Suffolk that you found tremendously successful and some of the reasons that you're able to make those claims that they're successful.
So I think one of the things that we did long before we had to pivot to the remote teaching and learning is we had an online course design institute. And the online course design institute was designed after our face-to-face course design institutes, which were really very successful here at Suffolk. The previous director really, the previous two directors, the founding director and the previous director, put together some wonderful programming that was actually brought to a number of universities in Boston. The people would attend and they would take it back to the universities. And so we modeled our online course design institute on what we did in the face-to-face Course Design Institute, but this gave faculty the opportunity to learn over 6 weeks. What in terms of setting up their course. We also basically advertised it as a course design institute where you could either be teaching face-to-face, technology enhanced courses, or totally online courses. Yeah. And so it really didn't matter. And I think one of the things that sort of appealed to faculty was we also talked about designing the course once for many ways of delivery. So whether you're delivering during 8 weeks or 16 weeks or a quick summer course, as you think about it, think about what it is you want your students to take away. What do you want them to learn more generally? and how you want to intrigue them to learn by setting up modules that had intriguing names, that ask questions that students would answer at the end of each one of the modules.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And it's interesting. So I was on your campus 2013, maybe, and I spoke with the director at the time who talked about the course design institutes and said some of the things that you're saying, but it sounds like they've evolved over time a little bit. And I think what's really interesting about it is the notion of designing a course for learning versus teaching. And I think that's really important. So you design the course around what it is you want students to learn, and you structure the course to create learning experiences for students. And the way you teach it can vary. And I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it. And I love that's the way you structure it. I tell faculty, and I really believe this to be the case, that we spend so much time talking about what it is we do as instructors that I think sometimes we lose sight of the idea that if the students don't do something with it, it doesn't matter. And so I really like that focus you have. I assume you've received really strong feedback from your faculty about the effectiveness of the institutes.
Yes, and I think that, again, what we hear is that what they're taking away is what they're bringing to every mode of teaching that they are part of. It also brings them to some of the other programming that we do. So we do midterm feedback, as many other institutions do, known as SKIDS, across the country. It's got great history and research behind it. And those are the faculty that once they get involved with some of the programming that we do, they come back again and again. But what we started doing, because we're not reaching all of, the faculty, except the ones that we see at like the others, the people that I'm sure you're talking to, we started a listening tour. And our two associate directors, we have an associate director for educational development and an associate director for learning innovation with technology. And they've gone out and they're meeting with every single department in all three schools. We have 3 schools here at Suffolk, and they are listening. They are asking faculty what they want from us, what we can do to help them in their teaching and their scholarly efforts. And that feedback, it's not only valuable, but the fact that we're listening is something that, especially in this time when, morale can be an issue around the modalities that we've had to adopt of late, teaching with masks, all those things, they really appreciate the opportunity to share. And sometimes they go off the rail, in terms of what they want to talk about, but that's what we're here for. And we invite them to come in and have more conversations with us if they want to have consultations. So that's something that's been really picked up lately is our consultations. But the one thing that I also wanted to share with you that's brand new for us is that we are starting a student advisory board. And we sent out a call and we sent it out to every single academic leader across campus, which includes our department chairs, and in our law schools, our assistant deans. And we've asked them to help us form a group that really will give us a sense of all of the students that we have here, the diversity of our campus. We want to be as inclusive as possible. And we, being faculty facing, we don't get enough exposure to students. So we're hoping that this is going to help us with our outreach to faculty as well.
I think that's great. And I think that the people I've spoken to who have student advisory groups, not everybody does. I think it's a great idea, have consistently reported what you just said, is it provides a slice of information that is missing often in the conversations. And there's a lot of work that's come out over the last couple of years on the use of student voices in a variety of ways. And I think this is a really useful one. I really like having you reach out to the academic leaders to get information back. So that you understand how to structure things. I just think that that's a really nice program. And I think given all of the things that we're charged to do, it's a nice way to balance out the kinds of things that you do with regard to not just listening to faculty, because although faculty have very strong opinions, their opinions are based on what they see in their perspective. You can balance things out by hearing how the students are receiving and what they're doing in the classroom. So it's a nice way to navigate it. Not always easy. During pandemic, we interviewed student leadership every Friday to find out what was going on with remote teaching. And we were surprised and troubled by some of the responses that we received. And it did lead us to create new programming. It was effective, but it was tough to hear some of the feedback. So it's a great process. So I think that's great. If I can shift gears, and this is always a tougher question because I think as a teaching center director, we always want to focus on the things we're doing that are going really well. But I'm curious about if you have any programs or things that you've engaged in that you think have been less successful, and if you have any idea why they might not have taken root at your institution as they might seem like they should have.
I think when we try to get faculty to come together here, we have a beautiful center here, and this is pre-pandemic as well. We just couldn't get the folks to come to some of the programming that we do. We do a symposium every year, and the symposium we bring in a keynote. We're bringing Jose Bowen in this year, and we find that we're getting like 100, 120 people. We have a large campus. We have a lot of faculty. We have, over close to 700 faculty, so why are we not reaching people? So what we've done this year with the symposium is we're doing in many ways across our programming is working with partners. And we're trying to be, I guess one would call it strategic about it, but we're also trying to be thoughtful about it. Who do we need to bring in so that we are making sure that whatever programming we're offering is bringing in the folks that really want to be, not just want to be there, but would benefit from it and would benefit from being together and having conversations together. So we're finding that partnerships for us is a really important way to go. So I think that would be the biggest thing. The other thing I think that we're working on and we kind of put aside for a while was our scholarly efforts, our efforts to support faculty in their scholarship, simply because we had so much to do when we were helping faculty think about remote teaching in the past, 2 years now, seems forever.
I know, it's been forever.
Ago. So, we have new faculty orientation. We start a program with them, and then we kind of fall off because we know they're busy. We don't want to, bother them too much. So what we decided to do this time is to reinvigorate our scholarly efforts, scholarly support efforts, by just putting in our newsletter a scholarly writing corner. And in the newsletter, for this week, we're going to talk about something that came up recently in some of the writing on Inside Higher Ed is about how to submit a proposal to a book author, just something simple like that. And then start intriguing them to do something that we normally would offer which is online writing, and where we bring faculty in at 9:00. We have discussion about something. We send them off to write. We do our writing. We all come back together. We talk about our progress and the things that we need to think about for the next week before we get together and try to engage faculty in their writing that way. So I think that the scholarly efforts is probably something that we really need to spend more time on. Some of the programming in the past has been very successful, but only a limited number of faculty, again, are coming to those. So we really need to rethink how to engage more faculty.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and it's not different from a lot of other folks, what you're saying. The getting people to events. It's funny, when you said 120, I thought that's fantastic, but I didn't realize the faculty was so big. 120 would be, we have 200 faculty. I would be really happy with 120. But I think that it is a percentage, and you do want to get as many people as you can to hear the message. And I think you're doing the right things in a lot of ways that are a little out of the box. The listening tour is really effective and using the student voices. But I also think trying to engage them, because I really think that scholarly piece that I started with, that we talked about at the beginning, I think that's really important. And once you add that to what you're trying to do in your center, it brings in some people who might not come for teaching talks, but might come in for something about scholarship. So I think it's terrific. And I think that giving faculty the time and space to think and write is really, really important. So I think that's all just really, really terrific. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this and to give us a little bit of an overview of things and to share your ideas. I wonder if you have any parting thoughts or anything you'd like to share you'd want people to know about.
I guess I'd like to go back to partnerships a little bit. We've done a lot of programming in the past, and a lot of that has sort of come from the center. This is what centers do. This is what our colleagues do. And now it's more like bringing in the partners to not only help us think about the planning, but also do the delivery. So we do, as I was talking a little bit about our academic leaders across the campus, we used to call it department chair. And some of the department chairs would call it department chair school. So we have partnered with the provost's office, and we have an associate provost there who is a former department chair. And now she and I plan this programming together, and we're bringing out people from the outside to talk to our faculty and we're to our academic leaders, and we're asking them also what it is that they want. And so we're hoping to do something more at the symposium. I won't talk about it here because it's kind of a surprise for the department leaders. But we're hoping to bring some programming to them that I think will delight and please them.
Well, and that's great. And that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about centers is you can't stay still. You have to continuously evolve to provide additional resources in response to the kinds of things that are happening in higher ed. And you mentioned Inside Higher Ed and the Chronicle. And I think that for a lot of us, we look at that to see where trends are going and try to anticipate and move in those directions. And I think that our faculty really benefit from that. It's as if we are the folks out there trying to make sure that the most recent cutting edge stuff is really not just available to our faculty, but implementable I'm not sure that's a word, but I made it a word, within the context of the institution that we're in. And that's really so important to me as I look at all of these different centers. And I've talked to people with different size centers at different institutions. And I think that it's not like a department, which I think are kind of similar across institutions. Each center, I believe, has to adopt the culture of where they are and respond in ways that make sense. And it sounds like that's the kind of thing you're doing. And I know this, Linda, because I know your center, you've come from other directors, which does actually create a little bit of pressure to make sure that you're still maintaining those relationships that existed before. So I think that's really a credit to you that you're really trying to keep moving the center forward. So thanks. And thanks for taking the time to talk and for sharing your expertise and your ideas. I really appreciate it. I think that it's wonderful to talk to a colleague at an institution that I've been to and that I have done a little bit of work with, and I think is an institution that really values teaching and learning in ways that are really supported by the activities of the faculty in the institution. A lot of times people say they support teaching and learning, but they don't provide the real work behind doing it effectively. So I really appreciate it. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure.